continuation of effort about previous work. Here you can see the agenda of this webinar. There are a number of important issues to tackle on core business and some less important on core person and core criterion, core evidence vocabulary. Next slide, please. So you're all familiarized with the practicalities. We kindly ask you to mute yourself. So whenever you have a question, you can always put it in the chat and raise your hand. As I said before, the workshop will be recorded, and we kindly appreciate for your consent. And if you have any objections, please write in the chat. We will always we're always publishing the recordings, the webinar minutes, and the slides after the webinar takes place. So you can always find it in the join up page of that contains the invitation. I want to spend time about explaining what the SEMIC does. I think that you are very familiarized with the objective and the intention. But we'll stress the fact, next slide please, on the work that has been done. Next slide. That is been done so far in order to give you the full picture. We started in October tackling issues that are related to core location, core business organization, and we published the core public event. We conducted some webinars in order to create an alignment of core public service application profile with the rest of the vocabularies. We conducted 2 webinars on in DCAT AP, and now we want to close the cycle of revising Core Vox in order to create some major and some minor release for each and every of them. But we would like to draw your attention on the forthcoming webinar that takes place on Friday about high value data set. I emphasized this because some issues that are foreseen in the regulation also have an impact on core business. What I would like to stress is that as you may already noticed, our previous policy was to create a major release for all vocabularies. Now we are trying to tackle each and every vocabulary as an individual entity and to create core vocabularies minor, major, or bug fix release for each and every vocabulary based on the needs that come into play. So, having said that, I pass the floor to Emilio, my colleague, in order to start presenting the agenda for today and the issues that we have identified that need to be tackled. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina, and good morning, everybody. In the following slides here, before tackling all the issues for all the 3 vocabularies that we mentioned, we're going to talk about the relation between SEMIC and the W3C. In the past, core location, core person, core business, and even ADMS were developed under the W3C space. They are not considered as official standard, but they've been introduced in the W3C space. So what's happening right now is that the different vocabulary published under the W3C space will be redirected to the one of SEMIC community. that's a way for us also to convey converge the community towards one place. Otherwise, it will be scattered in all the places. And that's also especially thanks to the collaboration with W3C, because they are helping us in order to provide the redirection towards each single vocabulary. You see in the example, the core location, for example, under the W3C, now there is a banner, but we are going to do the redirection over there. In a special case for this, it's about a core business and register organization. Because in the past, I don't know if Berto, you want to introduce on
yeah,
this.
That's good. So in the past, so this, as Emilio mentioned, core business has been developed and under the namespace of NS Legal, and then an improvement has been started on the core business, and Emilio can click on it. So which resulted into the creation of a draft namespace legal entity, and that ultimately evolved into RegOrg, registered organization vocabulary. So that is the current situation. Then we, in the SEMIC context, a new version of core business has been developed, and in that context, there was still being used, and is today still being used, the NS Legal namespace. Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay, because Peter says sound.
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Good. Okay, good. So on the core business 2.0 is still based on NS Legal. So what our goal is actually in the collaboration with W3C that we actually continue to use NS Legal and make it working, because today NS Legal is a dead end, and you end in a not functioning domain. So we took up the responsibility to activate that and to make that matching with the core business. We agreed with W3C to deprecate the NS legal entity, so to make that much more clear to deprecate it, and leave NS RegOrg as independent specification. So that is the current. Emilio, can you just one extra click? Then we should see what is happening for core business for the future. Is that we maintain the URIs, so with no URI change, there's no impact on our current vocabulary as such, but a better experience, and that the namespace NS Legal really leads to something. We did an alignment check with RegOrg, and if we look to it, all properties that exist in RegOrg have their counterparts in core business today. So that's another aspect. So we can create a mapping, or we can have a relationship between the two. And in the end, this means that we don't have to do a URI change and have no impact on the future of core business. So that is the, let's say, the least impacting choices that we could make to get out of this complex namespaces and forwarding of the namespaces, so that the evolution of core business is guaranteed.
Any questions on this one?
Yes, I have a question.
I
don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
we can hear.
You say no URI change. This means that the NS RegOrg URIs will still be available?
Yeah. There's no, we don't touch anything on RegOrg.
So it's not that the RegOrg registered organization entity now becomes legal something, NS legal something.
No, we don't. So
because we also use NS RegOrg heavily in much standards. That's why.
Yeah. So there's no let's say in core business the intent is not to use the NS reorg, because that means probably that we have to replace many of the URIs in core business with reorg URIs. And that would create a major impact. So what we essentially decided was to keep maybe the little misleading namespace NS legal in the as the basis of the URIs of core business.
Yes, but the NS reorg is not
No. So there's nothing suppressed on that side.
Okay.
So the things is that we don't, as SEMIC, we don't have the mandate to change something on NS reorg. If we want to do that, then essentially we have to create a new working group in conjunction with W3C to update and to align and to work on NS reorg, and which is open for anybody to do now. So there's no objection as such from our side. But it's what we experience is that today, if you use core business, then there's a reference to NS legal entity or core class, and then you end in a dead end. And that we don't want to. So we want to create better support for the core business vocabulary, that it is used in its own right and can be addressed with the issues, and then we can address it. That's the objective of this change.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? If not, then we'll move to the next section on the issues for the core business. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, let's enter in the content of the core business vocabulary. We are on the version 2.0 right now. In this slide, you see where let's see where the model stands. We will focus on the part of legal entity and formal organization in this within these issues. The first one concerning the definition of legal entity. In the usage node of a legal entity, we discuss about a legal entity is able to transact business. Which is let's say this gives the impression that legal entity transacts business, and we could include also concept like non-profit organization. Now, within this discussion, what is our proposition is to align with FIBO ontology, the financial industry business ontology. And in this sense, I can show you within the next slide the possibility to add a non-profit class, a subclass of formal organization. The idea is to make them distinct from a legal entity. First of all, you see in this slide three definitions: the legal entity definition in FIBO, where we highlighted the fact that a legal entity is a capacity to negotiate contract there. Then we have the legal entity definition in core business vocabulary, as you can see, self-employed person, company, or organization that has a legal right and obligation. And we have also the non-profit as in FIBO. So in FIBO, the legal entity and non-profit are completely separated concept. Where we have non-profit are organization where the surplus revenues it's used for distributing the organization. So it's so the idea, let's say, is to propose to align with the FIBO in our. So basically, we want to create a non-profit class, subclass of org from organization, but completely separated from a legal entity. The idea also is to change the concept, let's say, in the definition, instead of transact business for legal entity, because we saw there in this usage node transact business, change it into capacity to negotiate contract, like in the definition in the legal entity from FIBO. So the two of the note here that the two are not necessarily exclusive. So one non-profit organization could be also a legal entity, depends on the member state legislation of this part. So we keep them separated because they have separate meaning, but it doesn't mean that in the legislation they might be also the same type of entity. Any on this part, I would say any.
Give people the chance to read what is there, and if there's any questions, then people can come forward for the clarification, maybe. Any consequences that people see for their implementations? The general idea?
Rob.
Okay.
Excuse me. Sorry.
After you.
I see small differences with what we did. We indeed did something similar. We have, in Dutch it's called vereniging, but that's a non-profit association, but we didn't make it a subclass of formal organization, but a subclass of organization in general. So that's the difference. I understand that you have two types of classification here. The first type on the left side is saying, yeah, well, the organization is registered or legal. So let's say a more severe state of formality, but not every non-profit organization is a formal organization, in my opinion. We made it, we call it association in general, and we made it a subclass of organization rather than a subclass of formal organization. I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear, but
video.
Yeah, but it depends, because if you consider a non-profit, a simple organization could be even an association, let's say, per se. But when a non-profit could have also, let's say, right and obligation in terms of financial obligation based of death, as you can see. So it's a bit, I would say it's the same level of the formal, but let's say on the legal entity, because there are subtle differences over there, of course. It's the way indeed, as we said, surplus is managed. A formal one, if we go back to the, because I don't believe we have the definition of formal organization. I'm going back to that quickly. In the formal one, it's something that is recognized on the as a legal jurisdiction with rights and responsibility. That's the main thing. So it can include also charities, as you can see, government or church. So government is definitely, to reply also to the comment, can be considered a formal organization under the W3C organization ontology. We could, let's say, the idea is there to align with FIBO because they already did it as a formal one. So it's something that is, let's say, has some recognition in legal jurisdiction. If you go on the organizational level, then you lose the part of the legal jurisdiction. That's the difference between that I would say between formal and
I thought formal organization was that there's some recognition of the organization in a more general sense, which can be legal, and if it's legal, then it's a legal entity. But it could be formal in a more in a broader sense. But I'm not sure that we did it differently. Anyhow, non-profit in our modeling is not a subclass of formal organization, but just a subclass of organization, where it says that the non-profit organization is an association between, well, I'm looking here, our definition is something like a non-profit organization, an organization which has a non-profit purpose. That's
okay.
And I don't think that every non-profit organization is formal. It can also be that you have an association of some people who say we're going to do something non-profit, and there's no formality or anything there. But
okay,
yeah, well, that's, I know it's difficult, but maybe we made a mistake here, but
so then there is, I have Rob here. I have comments from Rob. I have some in the chat as well.
I was just going to say on a different point. I don't like this change transact business into capacity to negotiate contract. These, to my mind, are quite different things. And I don't mind deleting any part of it or adding any part, but changing transact business into capacity to negotiate contract, I think is highly questionable, because it's not about the same point.
But the problem is there that the term business per se is not yet, it's not really clear what does mean transact business, you see. So capacity to negotiate the contract is a bit more clear in terms of on the expression. That's why we want to like change it. That's the usage node, of the legal entity, because then the term is much more clear. What does mean indeed business per se?
Okay,
yeah.
but it's a different point.
Yeah.
So I don't mind deleting one or adding something, but I think they are quite different things. You might not like transact business. I don't have a problem with that, but capacity to negotiate contract is something quite different. You can have both or neither.
Sorry, I can ask.
You're limiting your definition by adding this capacity to negotiate contracts. We have the original definition from RegOrg, which was registered organization, was just an organization with a legal stature obtained by registration, by official registration, and it doesn't say anything about capacities to negotiate contracts or ability to do business. It just says, well, this is has officially obtained some legal status, and maybe that's that would be easier, because otherwise the discussion about this will never end, because every country will maybe have a slightly different idea about what a legal entity or a legal organization is, what you actually mean, what a legal organization can do or not or cannot do. The only thing we know, it's legal because it's officially registered in some way by the government. Okay.
So this is quite. I think this is a discussion that's not going to lead to a final conclusion here. I think Geert, your argument is that if you want to identify a legal entity, basically the registration of it is, in a legal sense, is the factor that is important and not what you can do afterwards.
Yes.
And I see a couple of questions here, also the comment from Rob that it's very hard to identify what actually the transaction of business or the capacity to negotiate contracts, whether that's really the different the distinguishing factor. And there are other questions, quite a lot of questions in the chat as well, to ask where the government organizations need to be. There is a point from Mihai that is maybe too specific here, with paying off debts and assuming financial obligations. A comment from Peter Winstanley that FIBO is very complex, and if we try to align with that, that might have all complications for ontological commitments. And okay. I think there is also Anna Rosa who wants to sort of question whether non-profit is not a subclass of legal entity. And that's basically, so we're basically having quite a lot of comments here of people who basically don't agree with the proposal. I think that's so maybe we should take this then back and work on a proposal that is more acceptable to people. Does that make sense, Emilio? Do you agree that, or Bert?
Yeah, fine for me. I mean, now we have some points also to think about. First of all, at which level non-profit could go. As we know, in on Flanders, that we use subclass on the under organization, not formal. Then we is like understand somebody else would like to have it under subclass of legal entity.
Yeah.
So that's a positioning. I believe the only thing that we could agree is that legal non-profit is definitely a different concept than legal entity, even if it's a subclass of a legal entity per se, or let's say even if, it's not integrated inside the legal entity concept. That's what I want to say.
Okay, so we'll need to work on this a bit more, Emilio, and
yeah, sure. Let's go on to next.
Yeah, maybe
Ana
next
Rosa.
point. Yeah.
Maybe a word to Ana Rosa, because I saw she raised the hand.
Ana Rosa? Ana Rosa?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Just a remark here. Regarding the registration to identify legal entities or not, which I don't disagree. However, I would like also to remark that when you register an organization, you can register either an organization from the point of view of the taxation or the economic point of view. You have a tax identifier where you can use for doing business, but also you registered branches. So branches is also a registered organization, but it is not an independent one. So just to know that and let you to think about it when you write this. Thank you.
We will touch, I think, the part of branches later on in the presentation, but that's a good point. Okay, I go to the next issue then. Representation of people as a legal entity. So we do have another issue about let's say in the core business vocabulary, the inclusion of sole traders. In the usage note, again on the legal entity, we write that legal entities are distinct from the concept of organization, groups, or sole traders. The proposition is also here, like the alignment with FIBO, and we can discuss, of course, on this. In FIBO, we have the sole proprietorship, which is the same way to identify sole traders. Again, there in the sole proprietorship or sole traders have been identified as subclass of form organization. So with the capacity, you see, so the definition is unincorporated business owned by a single person. So it's still a business in a way that can do contracts, but it's linked to just identified by only one person over there. So it's a bit different indeed. It's another class separately from a legal entity. In this case, we still make it as a subclass, or the proposition is to make it a subclass of formal organization. I don't know, Gert, in your case, do you have, you want to talk? So good, go ahead.
Yes, problem is that sole trader, one person, it's not compatible with your definition of an organization. An organization, I think, is an association of one or more persons, no? Of two or more persons.
It can be composed by I think in the top, it's still an organization at the eyes of the on a business register, so it's not you're not going to point out let's say the number of people now in that sense.
I think we left it out, the problem, not to create this problem. So we we have indeed a registered organization, and I don't see in the definition anything but that it's an officially registered organization with legal with a legal status. It doesn't say anything about including or excluding sole traders. The only thing is that your registered organization or your legal entity is in fact an organization. And if you look at the definition of organization, what do we see? A number of people organized in some community or other social, commercial, or political structure. That's what I see here. And then you could say a number of people. Well, it should be at least 2 people, because otherwise there is no community or structure or anything. But if the problem is, if you put it so clearly in your definition, then then you will attract discussion about it, of course. So we left it out. It's not in any discussion, not in any definition to be found if it's a sole trader or not. I know in our country, in Belgium, that sole traders are also registered in the KBO. This is the official register of businesses. That's true, yes, because they do business. Yeah. So we have that problem indeed, but we didn't, how to say, put ourselves in a position that this is a problem, because it's not to be found in any definition if sole traders are included or not.
So Geert, that's sort of the simple solution, is not talk about it and just leave it
That's
to
a simple solution.
legal environment in every country to identify if there is a difference.
I'm beginning to think that doing business in one way or another is a different dimension of organizations. You have their legality, the fact that some association is legally registered. You have the fact that they are doing business, non-profit or profit, the fact that they are a sole trader, or that they are maybe a real company. These are all different dimensions. And I think it's impossible to combine this all in one class. That's also the reason why, for example, with the non-profit organizations, we made it a separate class. And I see also now on the screen that you would make it a separate class of the formal organization. But yeah.
I mean, separate concept, I think, makes we could agree that it could be a separate concept. The problem is always positioning, I think, in the on the hierarchy. Is it that's why we say, okay, FIBO is complex, and I know, because it's quite huge. The idea is, okay, where we want to position, shall we align at least with them to say we can make it a subclass of organization, as there is a need to add it in a way.
So the different dimensions are something like legality. That's if it's officially registered or not. Another dimension is can it do business or not? And if it can do business or not, it can be a company or it can be a sole trader. That's the business side of it. And then you have the non-profit side there. And then you can combine all these things with double typing, which is very interesting to find a solution for that kind of problems. So I think if you go in the direction here of the double typing, that you can find a solution for this.
If I remember well, the issue was opened by, if I remember well, the issue was opened by Jakub. I see Jakub Klimek, you're logged in, but I don't know if you can speak.
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Hello, Jakub. So is it fine, such a type of proposition for you? It would be fine, because the additional sole trader proposing that way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just joined in because I was teaching. So, what is the proposition?
No problem. Yeah, it's to create a sole trader as a distinct class from legal entity, and as you can see from the screen, in alignment with FIBO, make it a sole trader a subclass of a formal organization.
Okay, and that would mean that the business vocabulary, which has the legal entity at its core, would not cover sole traders.
No, it will be there will be indeed distinct. Will not cover.
The classes are not disjoint, so you can be a legal entity and a sole trader, or just a legal entity, or you can be a legal entity and a non-profit. These typings can all be combined. The classes are not disjoint,
Yeah.
I hope.
Indeed, we don't want disjointed, and it's the same discussion that we mentioned before about non-profit. So we don't want to disjoint non-profit and legal entity. They are distinct concepts, but in case you want to have the same, let's say, double type, like Gert said, you can do it.
Yeah. Okay, then it's fine.
Okay. Any more comments or questions about this? Ana Rosa asks us why we want to classify some types of legal entities in the model. Why do we try to do that?
Because indeed, in a business register, you have different type of organization. Yeah. You will need to specify them. If you put them under the same type, then you will not be able to distinguish them. So we did not include in the definition in now current legal entity. So if we want to, let's say, specify them, one proposition indeed is to align to existing standard, I would say, to say, well, let's do it in that way, that way. But, yeah, I see Ana Rosa want to talk. Yeah, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. The problem I see is that types of legal entities depends on the regulation, on the specific regulation. So you can also include a classification of type of legal entity as a property of a legal entity, and then let people to tailor that classification depending on their own national regulation, or if there is an harmonized regulation that can be applied. But I think we are trying to discuss something that is not only very dependent on the regulation, the current regulation, but I don't know, it could change in the future with new business models or whatever. That is the danger I see, trying to put the classification in the model by itself instead of using a property to specify the type of legal entity. That's all. Thank you.
I think that's the right question. I think if you create separate classes, then there need to be difference in the types of properties that you have. Because if you all put them together, then you would have properties that only apply to some of the types that you have in your classification. So is it something, Emilio, that we need to look at, or that outside of the meeting, to see what the differences are in the set of properties for those things? Because that, I think, that would justify the creation of separate classes if the set of properties is quite different. Is that correct, Emilio?
But first of all, indeed, if we create a different class, it's because we have different meaning, you know. So definitely we have distinct class. Then once we agree on this, and also on the level of hierarchy in this case, then we can enter in details on which single property, what kind of property we need. So
sorry, but
yes,
I
we can do this in the next step.
I mean, it's not to, I cannot agree with that, sorry. It is not to agree which are the classes, it's to analyze which are the differences, so we can then derive which different classes we need, not the other way around.
That's what I'm saying, Emilio.
Yes.
If there is, if the set of properties for each of those things, sole trader, legal entity, and non-profit, are different, then it makes sense. If you don't do that, then you would have a a single class legal entity with lots of properties that only apply to some of the types. And I think that's important. And Ana Rosa says you need to see what the differences are and what kind of different properties you need to describe them to justify the creation of a new class.
I do understand.
Jakub raised his hand.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the question of the approach to modeling, because yeah, you can have various types of legal entities as a code list, let's say, but at the same time, it might make sense to have them as separate classes, even and this is just my opinion, even if the difference in properties is not there, just to say that this is an entity of some type, even though all the properties may be the same, the information that it is a different type might be relevant. But yes, it is a question of the overall approach to the modeling, whether or not to do this via classes or via controlled vocabularies. Sure. But I definitely agree that there are dimensions to this problem. The original question was just basically about whether or not people, physical persons, are included in the legal entity class or not. So this would seem to suggest that they are not, but then again, we said that they are not exclusive. So I'm not that sure what exactly are we suggesting here. The question was whether a person registered in a business registry can be an instance of a legal entity.
Yeah. And then indeed in this proposal, Jacopo, is that as we found out that in FIBO, sole trader or sole proprietorships have been, first of all, excluded by legal entity. As you can see, it was this in the usage note. So we say sole trader are excluded, and it's fine. So which means that they don't fit in the legal entity in the definition as currently we have. Then, as we have also in FIBO that the concept of sole trader, sole proprietorship are subclass of formal organization, then that's why we are proposing such approach. So this would allow you to be basically more flexible to say, okay, I don't want to use legal entity as a type. I am sole trader as a type. The other way around, like Ana Rosa says, we could conflate basically legal entity. I understand well Ana Rosa in that sense.
Yeah, and use a controlled vocabulary for a type.
Make it as a type, as a control in legal entity.
Yeah.
That could be, and if I see well, Georgia, you wrote that legal entity with the legal form is a control vocabulary.
Yeah.
This is applied in Italy as let's say in the vocabulary.
Yeah, absolutely, we have that, and I can say to you something more, that in the procurement ontology working group, I'm not participating now in the group no longer because I cannot, but in the past we already faced this discussion, and we came up saying that every country has its own classification. And I think that after this discussion about it's a legal entity, it's not a legal entity, it's a formal organization and so on, I think it's safer for a core vocabulary to give more possibilities to member states. And I think that the controlled vocabulary is in this case, flexible enough to accommodate different situations in each member state. For example, we definitely have a controlled vocabulary that is called the legal forms. And for us, for example, the sole trader is a legal entity in Italy, okay? And it's registered and so on. The other thing that I can say, I totally agree with Max saying that the classes are justified in the modeling if we have specific properties that characterize that class, that difference from the other class. So it makes sense to put classes for doing this classification of the types of legal entities or formal organizations. If not, I mean, if we are speaking about really in the core vocabulary, real general properties to identify the most important information, I would keep the model simple.
So your proposal, Georgia, is to keep the model simple by not creating additional classes, but have a controlled vocabulary so that all countries have the opportunity to be flexible and use their own legal form.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
In this case, then, Anna Rosa and Jacob, if we put it as a control vocabulary under legal entity, this would be fine for you?
Controlled vocabulary, even a property to identify the legal form.
Yes.
Yes, within legal entity.
Yes, you cannot identify a significant difference between two classes. The control vocabulary is the best approach from my point of view.
So the proposal is to do not create those separate classes, but have a controlled vocabulary or a property that can hold the controlled vocabulary for legal form. I see.
Yes, unless in your analysis, you say, well, it's from, for instance, there is a very specific legal entity type, which is, I don't know, whatever. It has very specific definition with specific properties. So in that case, if you find that kind of legal entity type with so specific definition and their own properties, then of course I can agree to create a subclass of legal entity. But if not, if the differences are not so significant, then a control vocabulary could be the best approach from my point of view.
So basically, what Anna Rosa has a different proposal from Georgia. Georgia says just make it simpler and have one legal entity with a classification. Anna Rosa says you need to do an analysis, and only if you have the conclusion that certain things have so specific properties that would justify another class. So there are two proposals there, and then Bert is on the list.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a small element into, let's say, if we apply this proposal of the additional classification as a property, then we have to put it probably to consider the possibility to add it to formal organization, at least to include things that are outside the definition of legal entity. So that's because that's like the arrows that we have today that you see on the screen. Sole trader is not connected to legal entity. If that is a possibility that we want to support, then we have to extend formal organization. So to keep that in mind, so in analysis.
You don't need to extend formal organization, because in the superclass of formal organization, which comes from W3C organization, there you already have an attribute to classify things. Could say, well, I want to specialize it for formal organizations, but maybe that's not needed then.
Yeah, we'll have to look to that, but at least
there is already
a legal entity. That's
there's already something on the higher level that you can use.
And then, indeed, my question, let's say, goes to Jacob. If we make restriction on the control vocabulary inside the legal entity, would be also fine for you? And the second question would be, shall we apply then the same mechanism under for non-profit? I would say, because then we could agree on this aspect as well for non-profit eventually. So first to Jacob, if we use it as control vocabulary, would be fine for you to distinguish a legal entity in terms of as a sole trader?
Yes, that is also fine for me.
Okay. So there are 48 people on the call. So can I see people's opinion to a +1 if that proposal to use a controlled vocabulary rather than at this point in time having separate subclasses? Can people just say what they think? Okay, so I get +1. If people object, do a -1 so that we can see that. Yeah, controlled vocabulary. That's Miha. That's indeed the proposal. Peter Winstanley is also +1. I see +1. Rob +1. So I think we can conclude. I don't see any objections that the proposal to actually create, to have a property in legal entity, to have the legal form, is what people see as the best way forward at the moment. Now, this is also, I want to also say that Ana Rosa's suggestion that if there is an analysis that identifies a different set of properties for something, that then we can propose something, but it needs to be based on an analysis of the differences between classes. So for the time being, we just have a controlled vocabulary, and then if we can do an analysis to create new subclasses. Okay, Geert is not completely.
The advantage of the additional classes is that, of course, you have your concepts inside your model. If you put it in a controlled vocabulary, then it's more or less it's less visible. It's less. You have to do a double hop to see if your legal entity is a sole trader, because you have to go into the classification and see how it's classified, your legal entity. But it would be easier. It would the controlled vocabulary would indeed calm the discussion right now, and otherwise it would take maybe a lot of time to figure out how exactly you want those classes, which attributes they should have, and so on. So the controlled vocabulary is an easier solution right now.
Yeah, for the time being, I would say yes.
Yeah.
And then we need to see if they need, like Anora said, we need to distinguish even more. Then we'll need to have a second iteration to understand.
But they remain important concepts, because the concept of the non-profit, we already had it in Flanders also. We created a separate class for it. And also, if you look at the fact that there exists an ontology like FIBO, where something like sole trader exists, it indicates that there's a need for that kind of classes, but maybe we also can combine legal entity with a FIBO extra typing, if you want.
Yeah.
But important, I think we make a distinction, and definitely if we make this control vocabulary, we need to change in the usage note of legal entity now, because otherwise, because as we now we see it's they are excluded. So we are going to change this usage note. So just one clarification, I would say, Max. We will apply also then for non-profit the same methodology, I can imagine.
That's what you proposed, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I can go next then.
Yeah, we need to see that we're running out of time a little bit, but go ahead.
Another important point is alignment with the high-value datasets, which is the Commission Implementing Regulation recently published. In this, let's say, important as well, because in the Commission Implementing Regulation, the core business vocabulary is officially mentioned over there. So we would like to tackle, as you can see there on the slide, we have tackled this point and along all the properties they described about business, there is a registration date, which is highlighted here. So the proposition is to add the registration date in the legal entity as a property, indicating the date in which the legal entity is entering some jurisdiction for regulatory or tax purposes. So it's really like for us to be really compliant, and since we are called in this regulation, to be as much as possible compliant with the regulation.
Okay. I think this probably is a non-controversial. Then go ahead to the next one.
Yeah. Does the legal entity has an identifier? The fact that it's officially registered? Because I think in Regor it was like that. You had your registration, your identifier, your legal identifier, and it was modeled, I think, or we modeled it, our version of it with ADMS identifier, and there you have a registration date, or you have a date on which the ID, the official registration, was assigned. So there's maybe rather a need for a registration identifier with a date and a string which identifies the legal entity, rather than just an attribute registration date. No, I don't see the registration number here in your legal entity class anymore. Where is it?
Oh, concerning the identifier, Gert, there is ADMS identifier in core business. So a legal entity has a legal identifier, which is an ADMS identifier. In this ADMS identifier, we have a property date of issue, which means the date in which the identifier was assigned. We could either assume that this registration date is in the date in which the identifier was assigned. That's one thing. Or we add a property under legal entity. I mean, I don't know if there is anybody else having an opinion on this.
Yeah, Jacob
yes,
says.
Jacob says.
Yeah, it could be different.
Yeah, could be different. Ana Rosa, you want to say yes or?
I think she.
Yes, I agree with Jakub, but also there are several numbers associated to a legal entity that are very relevant. Registration number is the official number provided by the company registry, but also you have the European identifier, you also have the taxation identifier, you also have, there are many identifiers, not only the registration number, that they are really important for identifier to work with a company, with a legal entity.
Okay. So the proposal there stays to have the registration date as a property in legal entity, even if there are in the registration, in the numbers, in the identifiers, there's a possibility to have several identifiers with different dates.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's keep it that. I don't see any objections to that. Okay. So.
Okay. I go next. Within the same regulation, there is let's say a discussion about for legal entity, let's say, to have accounting documents. Now, accounting documents, for what is you see on the left hand side of the regulation, it can include different type of documents. It can include you see financial statement, non-financial statement, also annual financial report. So it's quite a broad type of concept of document. On the proposition over there on the right hand side is to have is completely separated type of class. The problem is indeed the idea is to add in this definition financial, non-financial information as a result of an activity or organization. The problem is indeed until this moment in time we are not entering in the distinction between all type of documents. Definitely we need to have something that encompass them all if we want to look how the legislation is in place. I don't know if you have any particular need, somebody has particular needs on this, or let's say that's a way, of course, to model it, encompassing all three. So then people eventually could even create subclasses of type of financial statement or not, or annual financial reports. Any point on this? Somebody has a concrete way to manage accounting documents?
Ana Rosa.
Ana Rosa, please.
I agree with the inclusion of accounting documents. but not only accounting documents, because some countries like Spain, not everything is registered in the business registry. There are some properties of the company that are written down in documents, in notary documents. So for us, it's quite important to have legal and accounting documents associated to a legal entity, both of them.
So it's even more generic. I understand. Not only accounting,
Yes.
but also like
Yes.
type of documents.
Yes.
Okay.
But I understand, Emilio, that this particular class is clearly related one-to-one to the text in the legal document, in the high-value regulation. So I think that makes sense to have it there. And if there is other types of documents that can be associated to legal entities, maybe we should have a different class for those. But then we need to identify exactly what they what kind of documents are.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
Spain,
it's just to see. Okay, let's try.
Sorry,
Yeah, please, Ana Rosa.
As an example of the other documents, I don't know how to say in English. The basis of the functioning of the company is written down in a document, in a legal document from notaries, and also representation is usually provided by a legal document. So that is essentially when you need to provide the whole information about the legal entity.
So what you're basically suggesting, and I also see Mihai saying that there are legal documents that are associated with legal entities. So I would propose to keep the accounting document, because that is actually something that is defined by law, and then also add a class which are legal documents.
Yeah, we need to think about how to make it more larger in the sense than just a simple accounting document. Okay.
No, I was saying that keep the accounting document class, because it's actually in the legal text, and then for other documents we have a different class. And I say, for example, legal document.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. I don't see any objections to that. Okay, then I see.
I move next. Okay. While in the previous slide we talked about high-value datasets, here we talk about the BRIS legislation. Within the BRIS legislation, the alignment we could do. It's about the details, as you can see highlighted, details of the company website. Such details of are recorded in the National Register. Now, the other points are already included in, I would say, within legal entity. Our proposition is to add the optional contact point class, which comes already from public organization, where contact point includes already what is a contact page, an email, on telephone. So anything that it's related to a contact point for an organization, that would be easy. Let's say we are here. It's not really mandatory in a way compared to high-value datasets, where core business is really has to play in force there. But by adding this optional class contact point, I think we could satisfy also the BRIS legislation for this. And so contact point is already existing, so we are not creating a new class, but we just reuse the contact point class from a core public organization vocabulary.
Okay. Any opinions on aligning with BRIS in this sense, with the contact point? I think that would also be quite non-controversial. Anybody has a there's a still discussion about legal documents and accounting documents. I think we probably need to take that offline because we're not going to be able to discuss that here. Now for the contact point, I see Jakub seeing +1. If people can say if they agree with adding a link to the core vocabulary contact point to legal entity, people who have an objection, please come forward. Okay, I see +1. I do not understand why Georgia asked why we do not align with other vocabularies. I think we're actually doing that, using contact points from the core vocabularies.
Yeah, but for example, in DCAT, don't we use like, at least in the past, like vCard? Because if it is like that, as email is not a literal. Also as telephone is not a literal, because you have to, for example, define which type of email you have or which type of telephone you mean. And, well, I mean,
that okay, that's indicative indeed. I think I don't have the full model in front of me, but for sure, what we want to hear indeed is aligned with the rest of the core vocabularies. First of all, to have the at least contact point there. Then we could maybe enter in more details, Georgia, for contact point per se. You see, but there indeed,
that's true.
our first proposition is to align. Then, if we want to enter in each single property, we could do it in a, let's say, in a next phase. It's not a problem. For the time being, is let's say just have reuse what we have, and then we DCAT to, I don't know. Then it's another story that we need to look at.
Yeah, but here for contact points, this one needs. There are multiple ways to express it in multiple vocabularies, so there will be a multiple mapping and alignments to be done.
Yeah, but the thing about it is that if you import other stuff, you have to begin to think about what the ontological consequences are and what it is that you're inferring. So, I mean, with some of these, you know, like we kind of mentioned vCard, they're pretty lightweight. There's not an awful lot there. But bringing in some other things like FIBO is massive. And you need to do an awful lot of work to look at that. I don't know about the BRIS, but again, it's the same sort of thing. You have to take a look at what the overall consequences are of importing it. You have to be very careful about just picking and choosing. But what you can do is that you can be inspired by it, and you can bring something in as a new construct to one of your existing ontologies, where you know exactly what the ontological commitment of that decision is.
Yeah,
but I think that's the idea. We're not actually importing FIBO or anything else. We're being inspired by it. That's a good point. Okay. Want to take the next one?
That's a very helpful clarification, Max.
Okay, good.
Gerd raised his hand.
Please. Just a minor remark that maybe you can put contact point on the organization level, the higher level, because it's useful for all subclasses, for formal organizations, for legal entities, for anything which is because now you added it to public organization and now you have to add it to legal entity. It belongs on a higher level. We put it on the higher level. We added it on the level of the W3C organization.
Yeah, the thing is, we have different vocabularies. We don't have a higher level vocabulary in a way, in that sense. So we'll just reuse the relation in the class in the respective vocabularies.
Okay.
Okay.
Next. Then
next.
Seeing from another point from about BRIS here. The point G is about details of a person which can be authorized by a company to represent it in dealing with parties on legal proceedings. So somebody that can represent it in there. What you see on the right hand side of this slide is First of all, on the bottom, that is, we already discussed, the legal entity subclass of form organization, which in turn is subclass of org organization. And on top, you have the part of the screenshot for the W3C organization ontology, where you have a relation between organization and agent. And in these relations, you can have not only member or member of, but also you have head of, like subset of member of. So you have a certain somebody that can represent it in an organization per se. So in this case, the legal entity can inherit such organization. And so for the time being, our position is to keep the relation as it is. Let's say if people want to use a head of relation, they could still use it within together with the legal entity class.
Okay, I see it. I'm not quite sure. I can ask people not to continue that discussion about what the documents are, because we're actually interfering also with the discussion on the slides that Emilio is. I think my proposal for the accounting documents and the other documents is probably something that we need to create an issue on GitHub for further discussion, because this discussion here is, I'm not quite sure what the +1s are. Are the +1s on the proposal that Emilio made, or a +1 on what people said on the chat? I'm going to, okay. Georgia, can you please stop doing that discussion in the chat at the moment? And can we concentrate on the slide that Emilio is presenting, please? So I wanted to know if people are in agreement with the proposal that Emilio made, which is that we don't have to add anything because it's already covered in the higher level classes. Can we get people to agree with that, please? Okay, Hans agreed. So we're now taking any pluses and agreed to the proposal that Emilio is doing. Okay, Rob, I don't see. Natalie, can you please stop discussing this on the chat, because you're actually interfering with the discussion on Emilio's proposal. Okay. Hans de Raad, yes to Emilio's proposal. I don't see any objections to Emilio's proposal. So I'd like to then move on to the next point, Emilio.
Max, yeah. I was actually discussing about the contact pointer, not about the previous thing. So I'm sorry.
Okay, but good.
Yeah, it's a point, it's still from Brice. It's a point that Ana Rosa already mentioned a bit. You see in the point H, it's about information on any branches opened by the company in another member state. We do have, and that's what was already mentioned by Gert up front, as a legal entity subclass indirectly from organization ontology. You have already concept of suborganization of. Again, indeed, this is implicit, and so legal entity can inherit such type of organization relation on suborganization, so on which branches, let's say, can be included via a suborganization relation. So that's inherited, and I think could be satisfying this part. On the other hand, we have a concept of EUID or registration number that can be provided both through IDMS identifier. So there are two type of discussion here. In a way, we are basically saying we can already reuse what we have from the organization ontology and from the IDMS identifier. That's the overall proposition. Unless Ana Rosa, please.
She says branches can also be opened in the same country, and here in point H it says branches opened by a company in another member states, but it's also possible to have it in the same member state.
Yes, but I also made a comment in the previous point about the G point that it was missed. Yeah. It is because the point G is the particulars of any persons, and when you are dealing with companies, usually you have constraints on the representation. Of course, there are representations as a general power, but sometimes it is not so general. It is also for a specific amount of money or whatever. So because it is difficult to model constraints in a very structured way, I would propose just to allow a kind of text for property if you want to specify some constraint on the representation for a particular person in the legal entity.
Okay, but I understand this is a different issue from the one that's on the screen here. The issue on the screen here is branches, and you're talking about
it's what I said, that I made two comments on one of them on branches and one of them on the previous point that was missed.
Okay.
So I just was talking about them.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
For you, Ana Rosa, yeah, no, just I'm asking to Ana Rosa. For you, Ana Rosa, constraint means the type of, let's say, I don't say role, but maybe the how the person would have been represented that way. That's what you say. Can represent an organization. This is what you're saying.
Yes, for instance, you can sign for contracts, but below a specific amount of money. For instance.
Okay, it enters in quite a lot of details. Yeah, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So you have to do it. You have to think about that, Emilio.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, because in the previous case it was. You see, we would have used just a relation from with the coming from the organization ontology with the person eventually. Depends where we want to add in a way, because this relation could be, we could create even a sub relation eventually to distinguish the single cases from member of, but then you cannot express the type of constraints eventually if you want to do even more. So you need something, I don't say a class maybe, but you know, we look maybe more in details on this. But
so it's an issue that needs to be further elaborated and discussed. Yeah, we can put that on the list of things that need to be done. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, can I go next?
Yeah.
It was somehow branches. Yeah, for the branches we have a legal entity. It's connected with the address class, so each legal entity could have its own address. Let's say it's related to a certain address, which can be in another country.
That's on the next slide.
Yes. Multiple names and locations. Indeed, that's similar to what we were discussing. Business may operate in different addresses with the associated names. So there we would have already the concept of suborganization, like we already mentioned before. Since in organization ontology we have this as suborganization relation. And so in that case, there is we through org organization we will have the option to operate under with different names and different addresses as well. By creating a suborganization on basically onto it. Yeah, I see the comment from Gert. Indeed, there is also post in our org ontology. If people want to have different posts there, we link directly with an address. We have, I would say, even more a shortcut on this. That's really the way, in my opinion, even more flexible. If people would like to use posts, they are free to use it.
Okay. So about the multiple names and locations, the proposal to use the sub-organization in the organization ontology, and then you can use different names and different addresses. Yeah, I can see Ana Rosa agrees with that. And I think Ana Rosa was the person who created the issue. Geert?
You can have you have a relation with an organization with site, and the site has, of course, a location and an address. An organization can have different sites. Okay, you could do it with sub-organization with that relation, but in organization, it's done with sites for different locations. Huh?
Yeah, but it's not just only the location, it's also the question that that was raised, that locations could have different names from the
okay, that's
and in that sense we said, so as I think Emilio said, there's different ways of doing it. The simple way would be to use the site of, and if you have this necessity to also create different names, then the sub-organization would be an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the support unit of org is. Georgia?
Yeah, I think it's like a way, in any case, to create a structured organization. I'm not sure if it relates to multiple names and locations, but the support unit is a subclass of organization, if I remember correctly. And it's an organization itself. So it's kind of, once again, structuring organizations.
Yeah, okay. I think there might be, if they, I don't have the definition there, but there are various possibilities to link organizations together. We're talking here about the specific one where it's the same organization but operates under different names in different locations. And maybe the support unit would be also an opportunity, but Geert, your comment there?
It's called organizational unit, I think. So indeed, you can have you can specialize organization as an organizational unit.
Yeah.
So it's not only the possibility, indeed, to link organizations as instances of organization, but you can also link them, one organization instance with, for example, another of the type organizational unit.
Yeah.
It's not support unit, but organizational unit, it's called.
Okay.
Indeed.
Okay. So there's various ways that you can do this, but to have multiple names and locations, the possibility here that is the proposal here is to use sub-organization to do that. Okay. I don't see any objections to that. It's basically not adding something, it's using what's already there.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this was your last slide on core business, I think.
Yeah. Indeed. I think we are over the break, no, Max?
Yeah,
we're supposed to have the break.
We're about half an hour late on the break, so let's just
I would skip it then.
Yeah, let's skip that and then move on. I think it's Bert is going to take over there. Oh, no.
No. I continue on core person, and Bert is on core criterion and evidence. Okay. So indeed, now we are going to deal with issue the core person, and let's go over that. Now, in this slide, you see where we are in core person vocabulary. We will discuss about the person class mostly. First of all, is the proposition to have a middle name property. So it's a property that is the definition with the name written between the person's first given name and their family name. Some people have middle names there, so we'd like to have which is different even from all the rest of the property that you can see in the person class, from alternative name, family name, we have given name, but we would like to have middle name property there. So the proposition is simply to add this property within the name class. That's within the person class. Sorry.
Ana Rosa?
Yes, thanks. I would suggest that because there are different ways to different rules for the naming of persons. For instance, here none of these properties could fit with the Spanish use. So what I would suggest is to add a kind of other name property in general, which could complement the given name and the family name, and then you can identify which kind of other name it is. It's matronymic, middle, patronymic, or in the Spanish case, the second family name. So in this way, we can adopt any of these rules that you can find not only in Europe, but if there is others that can be also reuse this core vocabulary. Because at the end, you are adding many properties because these particularities add. And as I said, for instance, in this proposal, the Spanish case is not covered. So instead to add the Spanish case, I think could be easier to add this qualified property. I mean, not only the name, but also what kind of name is that name. I don't know what you can think about it.
First of all, Ana Rosa, all these properties are optional, and even that you could, let's say the Spanish case, if you consider that way, could be an extension of what is in the class person. Now, the middle name was raised as a request. I don't know if there is any need from other member states into adding to recognize there is a need to add middle name into it for them. In case member states can add additional property for this, so yeah, a middle name, I think it's quite can be quite common in terms of requests. Then it's fine to add it. I don't know any other possible names that can exist in the world.
Let's concentrate on the proposal. The proposal is to add middle name. And
my proposal is instead to add middle name or to add the second Spanish family name. Instead of that,
I understand, Ana Rosa, but the proposal that's on the table is to whether we want to add middle name or not. If your proposal is to add other names, or as you're saying, to use sort of a qualified name, then that's a different proposal, and we can actually discuss that, and we can create an issue on that in GitHub. But I wanted to have people's opinion now on whether or not to add middle name. Can we see if people, if my idea would be if people say, no, we want to do something different, then you're not in agreement with adding the middle name. So I just wanted to know for people, are you in agreement, +1 to add middle name, or are you not in agreement, -1 to add the middle name? Can we just do that? I see 3 pluses, 1 minus. Here it doesn't have one or the other. I see 3 pluses, 1 and 1 minus 1. Okay, Hans, I think that's okay. That's what I proposed. Look at whether we add middle name, yes or no, and then also there are potentially other attributes or other approaches to it, and then we can create a GitHub issue for that. Ana Rosa is -1, Peter is +1, so we're sort of halfway, 50-50 more or less. So there is no clear middle name can be derived, so there's no clear +1 from Circu. My opinion would be that if there is no clear agreement to add it, we shouldn't. And then I think we should then add that to the discussion on GitHub to see what we do with all these different types of names, but not keep on adding things that people request at this point in time. Do people agree with that? Do not add it at this point in time and move that discussion to GitHub? Okay. I understand Geert agrees with me with the proposal, and Jacob also to not add it and to move the discussion to GitHub. George also. Okay, I think that okay. It's clear then, Emilio, that we are not adding it, but we're adding a discussion on GitHub. Okay.
Okay, clear. I go next. Okay. Now, this is an issue concerning a better differentiation between sex and gender. Now, in the in core person, the proposition is to add. If we go back to the original diagram on top of it, we have just gender for time being. So in the proposition to add to differentiate gender from sex, with having two different definitions, of course. One is for sex, the organism biological sex, which could reuse the control vocabulary from publication office, because in publication office already publish control vocabulary from human sex. For gender, which will be the definition will be the identity, expression, associated role for the person. We don't have yet a control vocabulary from publication office. We are aware that in publication office that it's already on work, on the work. So we would like to add the property still with the gender, let's say differentiated by sex, and for the gender control vocabulary, we are going to wait for the, let's say, from the publication office once it's ready. But at least we, first of all, we differentiate the two properties, which I believe it's a good way to proceed, and then let publication or wait for the publication office.
Anybody in agreement with the proposal to have both these properties and use the controlled vocabularies from the publications office in the case of gender when that arrives? I see 2 +1s already. I see more +1s. I see many +1s. I don't see any -1s. Well, that's a different discussion, Ana Rosa. I think there are indeed two properties, but the question is whether we would agree with the controlled vocabulary. But I think that's outside of our scope, and we'll just take whatever is decided on the higher level or on the level of the controlled vocabulary. But it's certainly a discussion that we can have, but maybe that's not a discussion that we need to have in this group. I see +1s everywhere, so I just think we can say that the proposal is agreed. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I move next. Another request on the person side, it's a bit linked with we discussed with Gert on the contact point, because it's requested to add the contact information for a person, and then like we've done before, the proposition is to again have a contact point in the core person class as well, so where a person could have his own way to be contacted from. In addition, the contact point class is not really related to a certain particular class per se, the relation per se. So we could easily reuse it also for person within person.
Any agreement, objections? I see +1s, 2 +1s. Please feel free to add your +1 if you think it's a good idea. I see +1s. I don't see -1s. If you have a -1, please speak up. And if not, we could use a couple of +1s more, but okay, Georgia also. So if there is no objections to this, I think it makes sense to do this. And yeah, okay, so I have more +1s, so we'll also take this as agreed. Okay.
Okay, and on the next section, I would say let Bert talk about core criterion and core evidence vocabulary.
Okay,
thank you.
No problem. So on the next slide, you will see the high-level overview of the core criterion and core evidence vocabulary. And we have a number of issues, and 4 of them, which were registered in GitHub, have to do with these topics that are highlighted in red, and where we want to share, request some opinion from your side. So. Okay, the first issue that has been raised, and which is, I want to ask, let's say, participation in the discussion, because today there is a request for giving guidance on how to combine criteria. So we have the requirements, and the requirements are split in sub categories. And there was a request, can we combine them, or can we combine requirements in logical combinations? So we don't have this in CCCEV, so there's no language or expression that you can express some Boolean combination of it. So it's left up to sub criteria saying that's the collection, only thing that we have, but that's all. We have, however, a logical combination to express the kind of evidences that we expect as a response to a requirement that exists already. So my question is to the community, is there more need than the requester only? Or is there, if other people want to participate in this discussion? So Ana Rosa, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. First of all, apologies because the meetings on this core vocabulary, I was not able to assist. None of them, because all of them was at the same time that I have another appointment. So sorry for that. But I am working now in these issues with my competence authorities, and I have detected also a need that we lack of it in our model. Because when you try to specify criteria and evidence for a procedure, I have detected that you have cases in that procedure. So depending on the case, you have different requirements, different criteria. Yeah. So in our model, we are not able to model that because our model doesn't support that. But I think it is essential to provide a good information model for the procedures.
Okay.
So I would be glad if we can discuss about it and see how can we include it in the model.
Okay, good. Let's do that. Take that as like an offline discussion on it to see how we can progress on it. But this is as well if there are other people's having these same needs that we have to work upon proposing a concrete proposal. So thank you.
Are you proposing that people contribute to issue 51 there?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So
that's the proposal, or let's already speak up like Anna. So okay. Then we know what is the interest if we want to continue.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you for this already. Then I would move to the next issue. This is more an explanation on why it has happened and is the structure. So there's in the CCCEV vocabulary the notion of evidence, and which is a sub-property of a subclass of DCAT datasets being defined. Now, this has historic and motivations from the community back time when we did this revision, that there was a need to express and to see the evidence as a notion of data that you can share from one from the client to the consumer. And in that perspective, DCAT dataset is a very good abstraction way to express what that piece of data is that you're going to exchange. So that fitted the need, and that is the reason why it has been created as a superclass of it. And so the proposal is today to keep it as is. So not to change, to not to disentangle it, because this has this motivation. And
any comments there?
Here is not all evidences is a data set. No, here it's implicit. All evidences are being considered a data set, but not in the same sense as you find on the open data portals. So
pure semantically, if you say if you have this relation, it means is a. So evidence is a data set. That's what you're saying here.
Yeah.
So that's tricky, because not all evidence is necessarily a data set. Not all evidence is converted into data and forms a data set. But maybe you have other reasons, yes, to do this, but semantically it's a bit strange.
Can you give an example what is not data?
A data set is a collection of data. So, yeah, well, if you consider evidence as being information, then it's data, and maybe a collection of data. Yes, well.
Yeah, we use here the very broad definition of data set. So it's in the broadest sense interpreted. So this is the
yeah, but sometimes you see this kind of relations, for example, for things that are not information. You see, for example, building as a subclass of data, and that's not correct, of course. But here you could say, yes, evidence is information, so it's, it forms a collection of data. So yes.
And it's as well considered in the context of core evidence and core criteria in the sense that we have an exchange of between two digital systems. Ana Rosa?
Yes, I agree on your affirmation. I mean, evidence is a data set because in the DCAT vocabulary they define data set as various also multimedia and text information. So not only data as data, no documents, sound, video, whatever. So I completely agree with you. But the only thing I wonder if specifying evidence as a subclass of the data set, a DCAT data set, that means also that evidence is inheriting all the rest of properties. I mean, because
what the intent with it is as well is that in using evidence and to use evidence in the practice, that you in the first place, if you look for it, something like the notion of a title, that you use the property DCT title and not your own property in I don't know, Spain title or something like this. So the goal is that you align as much as possible with the, let's say, basic metadata properties that are available in DCAT space.
Okay, thanks.
So this is just confirmation that we want to keep the proposal specification as is.
Okay, we'll move next one.
Okay. The next slide, Emilio.
It's a little slow changing slides.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So here, this is a little bit more in depth on a question on the property is provided by. And if you look into the issue, you see that it was not always that clear on what is the property, which agent it actually is pointing to. And the current usage notes takes the perspective from the client that receives the evidence, that is from the client that receives the evidence. And it means that that's actually the first agent that it encounters from where it actually comes the evidence. Now that's might find unnatural and so on. So we in the proposal is actually turn it around and we say we're starting from the real owner of the evidence. And so we'll still look into all the agents that are transmitting the evidence, and that's in the first place. But we start from either it is the agent that is issuing and it's as well providing it. So we're really handing over that evidence, or any intermediate, so a service provider that is acting on behalf of that issuing agency to transfer that evidence to the right place. So we're starting from the source to closer to the recipient. And we added as well an additional usage note that the evidence provision might pass to a chain of providers. And so in that case, it's up to the users of CCCEV, the implementers of the CCCEV, that have to define what are the kind of providers they take in this chain. The last one, all of them, the first one, it's up to their choice.
Really? So Ana Rosa +1?
Yeah.
Do people have objections to this proposal?
Oh, it's a clarification. The goal is to clarify it more, to make it.
So there's no change of semantics, just making it clearer what it actually means. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody objecting to that.
Okay.
Then you can go to the next one, which is just an error, I think.
Yeah, and an error. The last one is a point has to do with period of time. Jim made a good observation that we use the properties end time and start time from the time ontology, and the range according to the time ontology is that it's an all-time instance and not an existing date time. So here, if we want to align and want to agree with the all-time properties and to make it correct, we have to correct this mistake and turn it into time instant. So this is the proposal that we align in the next version with all-time ranges.
So people want to express their agreement or disagreement? Okay. So the proposal is to change the range to time instant, and I see people having +1s to that. I see 3 of them. I don't see any objections to it.
So it's a more generic representation of the date time. Yeah. So that like that. And that was the conclusion of the issues that I want to raise on CCCEV. There are a few bugs into it, but we will address those as well.
So I don't see any comments anymore. So thank you, Bert. And then we'll move on to the wrap up.
Yes. Well, we've discussed today about person, business, and core criterion evidence. It was indeed quite a long discussion. You see, we need a lot of meetings until now, and there will be a new one on the 24th, on this Friday, on about high-value assets with DKTP. And then I let Paulina go with the next slide.
Yes. So I would like to, first of all, to say that we were thinking of our intention is to collect information about how different stakeholders are using our semantic assets. The idea is to have a clear view who is using what and which needs are fulfilled, and to go to a next step on processing the information and try to improve our asset by highlighting, collecting and highlighting best practices, as well as to try to examine the fact of the possibility of providing somehow of some type of implementation rules by collecting the needs. What are the needs of our working group and our stakeholders? So we have created a survey in order to see what type of semantic assets you are currently using and try to promote them as best practices in order to be used as an input, as a good starting point for other stakeholders. So we will highly appreciate if you could provide answer with this feedback. I would like to clarify that this survey is not something that will have deadline or a limit restriction in the sense that it will stay after also the time of this webinar, and it will be very useful for us if you can also promote it. We'll also promote it via LinkedIn and other channel. So in that sense, please provide us with feedback and also contact us if you would like to discuss something in a more details and see, for example, how we can promote your the way that you have implemented our extend SEMIC assets. So next slide. So, as it was mentioned earlier by Medio, we are conducting a webinar on high-value data set, as it is the need is due to the Open Data Directive regulation that is also has varied with in order to include the high value data set. You saw that during this webinar we tackled a first part of it by extending the core business vocabulary, but right now we want on Friday we will try to tackle issues that are related to the CAT-AP. We will highly appreciate if you could provide us some feedback into GitHub. This also holds for all core vocabularies, and I would like to stress the fact that perhaps we have overloaded the agenda for today's webinar, and I don't want people to have the feeling of being demotivating to provide feedback or that their opinion they didn't have the chance to express their opinion. I will highly recommend you. I would like to sincerely apologize if it was the case that people couldn't have the sufficient time to express their opinions, and I would highly appreciate if you could put your comments into GitHub. Last but not least, in different vocabularies, the need of mapping with schema.org has been expressed. Even though we haven't discussed, we haven't tackled this issue during the current webinar, which we wouldn't have the sufficient time to do this. I would like to inform you that we have started a mapping process, and how this mapping process can take place by following perhaps some type of methodology. And in the future, our intention is to provide the fundings of this mapping in order to be discussed and validated at a certain point, so that it can be used could be useful for our community. Yes, please, Mil, provide the chat in the chat the information about the high value dataset webinar. Having said that, I would like to sincerely thank you all for attending this webinar. Please provide your feedback into GitHub, and we are waiting for you to attend on Friday the high value dataset webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, and the team for preparing this webinar.
Thank you,
everybody.
And we'll be in touch with the report, and also we're creating the GitHub issues. I have Mihai says, oh, that was a
no, it
bye
was
-bye.
just a mistake.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.